The morning light streamed harshly through the bedroom blinds, cutting straight across Elena's face and jolting her awake. Her chest felt heavy, her stomach knotted. Today was supposed to be one of the happiest days of her life, the day she would finalize plans for her wedding, a celebration she had dreamed about since she was a little girl. Instead, the day began with a revelation that had shattered her world before she even had a chance to sip her coffee. Elena's phone buzzed with a message from her fiancé, Daniel. His words were terse, almost clinical. "We need to talk. 72 hours." Her heart raced as she read and reread the message. Daniel's tone was unusual, urgent and decisive, and it immediately set her on edge. But before she could respond, another message came through, from her parents. Her mother's cheerful text seemed normal at first, until Elena scrolled further and found the attached photo. It was a check, large, enough to fund a mid-range wedding, addressed to her sister, Vivienne. The check bore a note from her parents, casually signed, "We thought Vivienne would benefit more from this gift at this time. Love, Mom and Dad." Elena felt the room tilt, her vision narrowing as the betrayal sank in. Her wedding fund, the money she had been promised for months, the money she had envisioned using to book the venue, caterers, and everything she had meticulously planned, had been diverted to her sister. Vivienne, the sister who had always received preferential treatment, had been handed the key to Elena's dreams while Elena was left scrambling for scraps. Her hands shook, and her mind raced. She thought about every milestone in her life where she had felt overlooked, every birthday, every graduation, every personal achievement. Vivienne had always been first, always celebrated, always praised. And now, at the most significant moment of Elena's adult life, the favoritism had struck its cruelest blow. The reality was sharp, immediate, and inescapable. Her wedding, the symbol of her happiness and independence, was under threat, and her parents had knowingly chosen to prioritize her sister. Rage bubbled under the surface, hot and consuming. Yet beneath it, there was also fear. Fear that Daniel's warning might be connected to the financial mess, fear that this betrayal could unravel everything she had worked toward, and fear of confronting her family with the depth of her hurt. Daniel arrived an hour later, his expression tense. Elena could read the anxiety in his eyes, mirroring her own. He didn't waste words. "Elena, I just found out. Your parents gave your wedding fund to Vivienne. We have 72 hours to figure this out. I can't postpone indefinitely. What's your plan?" The words hit like a hammer. She had exactly 3 days to salvage her wedding plans, to confront her parents, and to decide whether she would let this betrayal define her or whether she would reclaim control in her own hands. It wasn't just about money, it was about agency, recognition, and respect. Her family had shown, in the most explicit terms, who they valued most. And Elena knew instinctively that she couldn't allow herself to be minimized this time. The next hour was a whirlwind. She and Daniel reviewed their options, each suggestion more desperate than the last. Borrowing money, downsizing the wedding, postponing, it all felt like surrender. And surrender wasn't part of Elena's nature. Her mind, fueled by a cocktail of hurt, disbelief, and simmering anger, began plotting. She wasn't going to allow her parents' favoritism to dictate the course of her life. She would find a way to make them confront the consequences of their choices, and she would ensure her voice, and her wedding, were not ignored. By late morning, Elena made the first move. She called her parents. The line clicked with familiar warmth before she cut through it with precision. "Mom, Dad. Why did you give my wedding fund to Vivienne?" The voice on the other end was calm, almost detached. "Elena, we thought it would be better for her at this time. You have options. Don't overreact." Overreact? Elena's hands clenched into fists. Their casual dismissal of her feelings, the ease with which they had overridden her plans, was the final push. This wasn't just favoritism, it was an active decision to undermine her happiness. And in that moment, a fire ignited within her. If her parents thought they could control her, manipulate her, and ignore her desires without consequence, they were gravely mistaken. For the next several hours, Elena's mind worked furiously. She made lists, calculated budgets, and reached out to vendors she had already spoken with, requesting flexibility and exploring alternate funding. Each step was a small act of reclamation, a silent statement to her parents that she was no longer a passive participant in the narrative they had constructed. But it wasn't enough. The financial gap was significant, and time was limited. Elena realized that to assert her independence, and to confront the betrayal with the weight it deserved, she would need more than quick fixes. She would need strategy, precision, and a plan that forced her parents to reckon with the consequences of their actions. Her mind turned to Vivienne. Her sister had always been a factor in Elena's life, sometimes ally, often obstacle. She wasn't cruel, not overtly, but she had been complicit in the favoritism, enjoying privileges that Elena had earned but never received. Elena considered the emotional impact of confronting Vivienne, whether directly or indirectly, and weighed it carefully. Revenge, she realized, wasn't about emotional outbursts or public embarrassment. It was about agency, clarity, and the undeniable demonstration of consequence. By the end of the day, Elena had a plan taking shape. She would not react impulsively, but she would act decisively. She would leverage her skills, her contacts, and her determination to reclaim what had been taken from her. She would ensure that her wedding, and her voice in her family, were no longer negotiable, no longer sidelined, and no longer subject to favoritism. That night, as she lay in bed, Elena's thoughts raced. The $72 an hour deadline weighed heavily, but it also sharpened her focus. Time was short, stakes were high, and the betrayal had ignited something in her that was as much about survival as it was about justice. She realized that the upcoming hours would define more than just her wedding. They would define how she navigated betrayal, how she reclaimed her dignity, and how she balanced the desire for retribution with the need for moral integrity. Sleep came fitfully, her mind replaying the morning's revelations and the possibilities ahead. Elena knew she couldn't undo the betrayal. She couldn't make her parents suddenly act fairly, and she couldn't erase Vivienne's unintended, or perhaps intended, advantage. But she could control her response. She could turn anger into action, hurt into strategy, and frustration into a plan that demanded recognition and accountability. When morning broke, Elena rose with renewed clarity. The 72-hour countdown had begun, and she was ready. Her wedding, her future, and her dignity were hers to protect. And she would ensure, through every calculated decision and deliberate move, that her parents and sister understood, finally, the consequences of their choices. Elena spent the morning in a haze, pacing back and forth in her small apartment. The betrayal cut deeper with every thought, every memory of her parents' dismissive comments over the years. It wasn't just the wedding fund, they had undermined her dreams, her achievements, her very sense of self-worth. The check made out to Vivienne was not simply money, it was a symbol of everything Elena had been denied while her sister was celebrated for the same, or lesser, accomplishments. She opened her laptop and began mapping out the next 72 hours. Every vendor she had contacted for her wedding, every friend who had promised to help, every potential source of funding became a point in her mental strategy. She wasn't just planning logistics, she was planning her assertion of independence, her reclaiming of agency, and, ultimately, her revenge, not the cruel kind, but the kind that demanded recognition and respect. Her phone buzzed with another message from Daniel, terse but supportive. "We have to decide now. Are you with me?" Elena's fingers hovered over the keyboard. Daniel had always been patient, understanding, and supportive, but the pressure was real. If they didn't secure funding quickly, the entire wedding, and the chance to assert her agency in the face of her parents' betrayal, would collapse. She took a deep breath. She had to act, but carefully. Any rash decision could backfire, undermining her plan to reclaim respect. She started by reaching out to close friends and extended family, subtly inquiring if anyone could assist, not framing it as a request for charity but as a collaborative effort to bring her vision to life. She wanted to demonstrate resourcefulness and determination, qualities her parents had often overlooked. Her calls and messages were calculated, every word was precise, designed to signal competence and resilience. As she worked, Elena reflected on her relationship with Vivienne. Her sister was kind, often generous, but had been raised in an environment that always rewarded charm and compliance over diligence and foresight. Vivienne had never been malicious, but her parents' favoritism had placed her in a position of unearned advantage. Elena felt conflicting emotions. Part of her wanted to confront Vivienne directly, to express the hurt and frustration that had built over the years. But she realized that such confrontation could derail her plan. Instead, she would use Vivienne's advantage as leverage to demonstrate her own capabilities, turning the tables quietly, effectively, and publicly enough that her parents would have no choice but to recognize her agency. By late afternoon, Elena had compiled a list of viable solutions. Small personal loans, contributions from friends and distant relatives, negotiations with vendors for flexible payment options, all were possible if she acted decisively. Yet her mind was also occupied with the emotional weight of the betrayal. Every message she received, every vendor update, every potential donor or helper reminded her of the delicate balance she had to maintain: act quickly, but carefully, assertively, but without burning bridges. She sat down, staring at the ceiling, and allowed herself a moment to feel the anger and disappointment. The betrayal wasn't just financial, it was deeply personal. Her parents had decided, unilaterally, who deserved support, and in doing so, they had undervalued her agency, her dreams, and her voice. But Elena knew that raw emotion without action would not achieve anything. If revenge was to have meaning, it had to be measured, precise, and effective. By evening, she had begun executing her plan. She secured a short-term loan from a trusted friend and negotiated with vendors to allow staggered payments. Each small victory reinforced her sense of empowerment and chipped away at the humiliation she had felt earlier. Her independence was emerging as a tangible force, and she could almost feel the unspoken pressure building on her parents, even from a distance. The emotional struggle was intense. Elena found herself oscillating between rage and fear, resentment and determination. She replayed her parents' casual explanation over and over: "We thought it would be better for Vivienne at this time. Don't overreact." That simple statement encapsulated years of disregard and favoritism, and Elena felt the full weight of it now. Yet within that storm of emotions, she identified clarity. She would not overreact, but she would respond. Strategically. Decisively. And in a way that her parents could neither ignore nor dismiss. That night, as she and Daniel reviewed the plans, she realized that her approach to revenge wasn't about confrontation or humiliation. It wasn't about yelling, shaming, or punishing. It was about demonstrating competence, resilience, and autonomy, the very qualities her parents had overlooked. Every logistical success, every negotiated agreement, every carefully managed interaction was part of a larger narrative designed to assert her agency and reclaim the respect she had been denied. Elena also began contemplating the psychological effects of her plan. Revenge, she understood, was double-edged. If executed poorly, it could backfire, leaving her bitter and isolated. But if executed carefully, it could deliver a sense of justice without cruelty. She resolved to maintain composure, to act with integrity, and to focus on results rather than emotion-driven retaliation. This was about creating undeniable consequences for the disregard she had suffered, not about hurting anyone unnecessarily. As the hours ticked by, Elena grew more strategic. She reviewed potential ways to make her parents fully understand the impact of their decision without resorting to public embarrassment. One idea was to ensure the wedding itself became a visible testament to her resourcefulness, planning, and independence. Another was to engage close family members in subtle ways that highlighted her initiative and capability, forcing recognition through observation rather than confrontation. The night deepened, and Elena lay awake, running through every scenario in her mind. Each plan carried risk, each decision required precision, and each step had to be timed perfectly. She felt a mixture of exhilaration and anxiety. For the first time in years, she was taking control of a situation that had long been dominated by her parents' decisions and favoritism. The betrayal had ignited something powerful, a drive to assert her worth, to reclaim her dreams, and to demonstrate that she would not be sidelined. By the time the first light of dawn seeped through her window, Elena had finalized the core of her plan. She would act with precision over the next 72 hours, leveraging her independence, her network, and her determination to reclaim control. Each day would be deliberate, each action calculated, each outcome designed to assert her agency and demand acknowledgement. The emotional intensity of the situation remained high. Elena felt hurt, betrayed, and angry, but now, those feelings were tempered by clarity, strategy, and resolve. She understood the stakes: the window of opportunity was narrow, the consequences significant, and the potential for lasting impact immense. Yet she also understood that this was more than a logistical challenge, it was a test of character, patience, and moral balance. As she rose to begin the day, Elena felt a renewed sense of purpose. The betrayal by her parents had been a shock, a painful blow, but it had also revealed a deep well of resilience, ingenuity, and strategic thinking within her. The 72-hour countdown was both a constraint and a catalyst, driving her to act decisively while demanding careful consideration. She would reclaim her wedding, assert her independence, and create a situation in which her parents could no longer dismiss or minimize her. And for the first time since the morning's revelation, Elena felt a flicker of hope. The path ahead was challenging, fraught with tension and emotional complexity, but it was hers to navigate. With every calculated step, she would transform betrayal into empowerment, hurt into strategic action, and despair into a demonstration of undeniable agency. The next 72 hours would test her in ways she had never imagined, but Elena was ready. The fire of betrayal had become a tool, guiding her decisions, sharpening her focus, and compelling her to act with precision, clarity, and purpose. The countdown had begun, and with it, the opportunity to reclaim her dreams, assert her independence, and deliver a quiet but powerful lesson in consequence to those who had underestimated her. Elena woke with a renewed sense of determination. The sun had barely risen, and the city outside her window was still quiet, almost reverent in its calm. She didn't allow herself the luxury of hesitation. The betrayal from her parents still stung, but it had been transformed into a focused, strategic energy. There was no time for dwelling on hurt, the clock was ticking, and the 72-hour deadline loomed like a shadow over every decision she made. The first order of business was securing immediate funds to salvage her wedding plans. She called a trusted friend, someone who had always respected her resourcefulness and reliability, and explained the situation briefly but clearly. Her request was not framed as desperation, it was framed as an opportunity for collaboration. Elena had learned over the years that tone mattered as much as content. Anger or pleading would weaken her position, composure and strategic framing would strengthen it. By mid-morning, she had secured a short-term loan sufficient to cover the most urgent expenses, the venue deposit, catering retainer, and her wedding dress. Each confirmation email felt like a small victory, a tangible step toward reclaiming control. Elena allowed herself a brief smile, but it was tempered by the knowledge that this was only the beginning. Her plan required not just financial solutions, but strategic maneuvers that would force her parents, and perhaps Vivienne, to acknowledge her agency and independence. She moved next to the social aspect of her plan. Elena reached out to key family members who were sympathetic to her situation, discreetly sharing the truth about her parents' decision and her proactive steps to reclaim her wedding. The purpose wasn't to shame or humiliate, it was to subtly shift the narrative, ensuring that her absence or delay would not go unnoticed. Every conversation was calculated to highlight her competence, her initiative, and the injustice she had endured. The day passed in a blur of calls, emails, and careful coordination. Each step reinforced a critical point: Elena was no longer passive. She had transformed hurt into strategy, frustration into action. And with each accomplishment, her confidence grew. She began to see her parents' favoritism not just as a personal slight, but as a vulnerability she could navigate and, ultimately, correct through demonstration rather than confrontation. That evening, as Elena reviewed her plans, a message from Daniel arrived. "Everything okay? You're doing amazing. Just remember, we're in this together. 48 hours left." Her chest tightened at the urgency of the reminder, but she also felt reassurance. Daniel's support was steady, grounding her when the emotional stakes threatened to overwhelm her. Together, they reviewed every vendor, every payment schedule, every minor detail that could affect the wedding. The couple worked with precision, their collaboration a silent defiance of the chaos her parents' decision had unleashed. But the emotional challenge was as taxing as the logistical one. Elena couldn't ignore the psychological weight of betrayal. Every time her phone buzzed with a message from her parents or Vivienne, a mix of resentment and controlled anger surged through her. She realized that revenge wasn't about immediate gratification, it was about deliberate, calculated steps that would create undeniable consequences. Her strategy had to be patient, precise, and effective. To ensure her plan was airtight, Elena documented every action, every conversation, and every transaction. She created a timeline that mapped out the next 72 hours in detail, ensuring that no misstep could compromise her position. This meticulous approach wasn't just practical, it was symbolic. By demonstrating control over every variable, she was reclaiming the autonomy that her parents had undermined with a single careless decision. As night fell, Elena allowed herself a moment of reflection. The betrayal had exposed long-standing patterns of favoritism, but it had also revealed a hidden strength within her: resilience, resourcefulness, and strategic thinking. She understood now that revenge, if executed wisely, wasn't about hurting others, it was about asserting oneself in a way that demanded acknowledgement and respect. Her mind also turned to Vivienne. Her sister had always been part of Elena's life, often benefiting from the very favoritism that had caused this current crisis. Yet Elena did not approach the situation with anger toward Vivienne. Instead, she saw an opportunity to demonstrate her own competence in contrast. Vivienne's advantage, whether intentional or not, became a backdrop against which Elena's initiative and determination would shine. By the second day, Elena had moved into full operational mode. She finalized contracts with vendors, confirming staggered payments and securing commitments that would ensure her wedding plans remained intact despite the diverted funds. Each completed task felt like a small victory, a tangible assertion of agency. But the stakes remained high. Any misstep could undo everything, leaving her vulnerable not just to logistical failure but to the lingering psychological impact of betrayal. In parallel, Elena orchestrated subtle visibility measures. She ensured that key family members and friends were aware of her progress, not as a boast, but as evidence of her capability. Every social interaction, every public acknowledgement, was a deliberate step to ensure that her parents could not dismiss or ignore her achievements. She was reclaiming narrative control, demonstrating that she could succeed without relying on their favoritism or approval. The 72-hour deadline loomed closer, and Elena felt the tension heighten. Her parents reached out again, their messages increasingly tentative and concerned. Each contact tested her restraint. She did not respond impulsively. Her silence was a calculated element of her strategy, forcing her parents to confront the consequences of their choices without overt confrontation. Late into the night, Elena and Daniel reviewed the final elements of the plan. They discussed contingencies, backup funding, and communication strategies. Every detail was scrutinized, every possibility anticipated. The couple operated as a unit, a quiet defiance against the chaos imposed by Elena's parents' favoritism. As she lay in bed, Elena reflected on the emotional journey of the past 48 hours. The betrayal had been sharp, immediate, and deeply personal, but it had also catalyzed a transformation. She had shifted from passive hurt to active strategy, from emotional turmoil to focused action. The revenge she sought was not about punishment but about reclaiming agency, asserting independence, and demonstrating undeniable competence. Elena realized that her approach to revenge required a delicate balance between emotional expression and strategic action. Too much emotion could compromise her plan, too little could undermine the psychological impact on her parents. She had to navigate carefully, ensuring that her actions communicated the consequences of their favoritism without devolving into destructive confrontation. By the early hours of the third day, Elena's plan was nearly complete. She had secured the funding, finalized contracts, and orchestrated visibility measures that ensured her achievements would be noticed. The final step remained, the confrontation with her parents, the moment in which her strategy would deliver its full impact. She understood the weight of this moment. It was not about anger or retribution, it was about demonstrating the consequences of their choices and reclaiming her rightful agency. Elena closed her eyes, allowing herself a brief pause. She was exhausted but resolute. The betrayal had ignited a fire within her, a determination that had transformed hurt into strategy, frustration into empowerment. The next 24 hours would test her patience, resilience, and ability to execute under pressure. But she was ready. She had navigated emotional turbulence, logistical challenges, and familial dynamics with precision and clarity. And now, the final act awaited, the moment in which her careful orchestration would confront the betrayal head-on, forcing acknowledgement, recognition, and perhaps, reconciliation. Elena's heart was steady, her mind focused, and her resolve unshakable. The stage was set. The countdown had entered its final phase. The third day dawned with a tense stillness. Elena woke early, her mind already reviewing every detail of the plan she had carefully constructed. Today was the day everything would converge, the culmination of 3 days of strategy, precision, and emotional fortitude. The 72-hour deadline was nearly complete, and the weight of the moment pressed on her chest like a tangible force. She felt anticipation mingled with anxiety, excitement tempered by caution. She began the morning by reviewing the final financial arrangements. Every payment had been confirmed, every vendor was aware of the timing, and every contingency plan was in place. Elena had secured just enough funding to cover the essentials, the venue, the catering, the wedding dress, and the necessary decorations. But beyond logistics, the most critical aspect of her plan was visibility. Every step she had taken was designed to make her competence undeniable, not through confrontation, but through demonstration. Her parents could no longer claim ignorance or dismissiveness, the evidence of her initiative was irrefutable. Daniel arrived mid-morning, his expression a mixture of concern and support. He had been by her side throughout the ordeal, providing steady encouragement and practical advice. Elena welcomed his presence, it grounded her, reminded her that she was not alone in facing the chaos created by her parents' favoritism. Together, they reviewed the day's schedule, ensuring that every moment of interaction with family members, vendors, and friends was deliberate and purposeful. By late morning, Elena received a text from her mother. "Elena, we need to talk. Can you come home?" She read the message carefully, feeling a surge of controlled anger. Her parents' sudden concern after 3 days of indifference and deliberate favoritism was almost laughable, but it was also expected. They were beginning to recognize, however belatedly, the consequences of their choices. Elena decided not to respond immediately. Silence, she knew, was a powerful tool. It forced her parents to confront the reality of her independence and the necessity of acknowledgement. Instead, she focused on final preparations. The venue staff confirmed the timing of decorations and catering, while friends and relatives who had offered discreet assistance arrived to help with setup. Elena moved among them with a calm, authoritative presence, issuing instructions and coordinating efforts. Her demeanor was striking, self-assured, composed, and undeniably competent. Every interaction reinforced the narrative she had been constructing. Elena was capable, organized, and resilient, despite the attempts to undermine her by those closest to her. By afternoon, Elena knew it was time to create the moment that would have the most impact. She had arranged a casual, seemingly spontaneous gathering at the venue, inviting select family members who were sympathetic or observant of her efforts. Her parents were expected to arrive, and the plan was clear. They would witness firsthand the results of her initiative, the tangible evidence of her resourcefulness and determination. When her parents finally arrived, Elena felt a mixture of satisfaction and tension. They stepped into the venue, their expressions a blend of curiosity and apprehension. The space was elegant but modest, perfectly executed within the financial and time constraints she had navigated. Decorations were carefully arranged, the catering team was in position, and friends and relatives were present to witness the unfolding scene. Her mother spoke first, her voice cautious. "Elena. This is impressive. We didn't realize." Elena held up a hand, interrupting politely but firmly. "Please, let me finish before commenting. Everything you see here was arranged without your assistance, without the fund you chose to divert, and within the time constraints imposed by your decision. This is what I could accomplish on my own." Her parents' expressions shifted subtly, the realization beginning to sink in. They had attempted to dictate the narrative, to favor Vivienne, and to minimize Elena's agency, but they could no longer ignore the results of her actions. The room was filled with evidence of her competence, her planning, and her resilience. Vivienne, who had arrived with a mixture of curiosity and trepidation, glanced around, realizing for the first time the magnitude of Elena's achievement. Her initial shock quickly gave way to admiration, and perhaps a hint of guilt. She approached Elena cautiously, unsure whether to offer praise, apology, or explanation.
I didn't expect this," Vivienne admitted softly.
"I know Mom and Dad gave me the money, but this is amazing." Elena nodded, acknowledging her sister without confrontation. "This isn't about blame, Vivienne. It's about demonstrating what's possible when one is forced to navigate challenges independently. You benefited from their choice, and I adapted to mine. The difference is clear now, isn't it?" Vivienne nodded, speechless. The subtle yet undeniable statement had been delivered. Elena's parents, meanwhile, remained silent, their expressions a mixture of pride, guilt, and dawning awareness. The weight of their favoritism, and the consequences of their decision, hung in the air. Elena's phone buzzed. Daniel sent a quick text, "You've done it. They see you now." She smiled faintly, pocketing the phone. The climax of her plan wasn't a confrontation, it was a demonstration. The wedding was not just a celebration of her union with Daniel, it was a testament to her resilience, ingenuity, and independence. Every detail, every decision, every accomplishment served as irrefutable evidence of her agency. Her parents attempted to interject, offering belated praise and acknowledgement. "Elena. We see now. We should have listened to you from the beginning," her father admitted, his voice tinged with regret. Elena allowed a calm, measured response. "It's not just about seeing me now. It's about recognizing that my voice, my choices, and my capabilities matter. I hope this moment is a reminder that favoritism and dismissal have consequences." Her mother's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "You're right, Elena. We've been unfair. I understand now." Elena's heart felt a mixture of relief and satisfaction. The revenge she had orchestrated was not destructive, not humiliating, but profoundly effective. Her parents had witnessed the impact of their choices, confronted the results of their favoritism, and acknowledged her competence, all without her needing to resort to confrontation, anger, or malice. As the day progressed, the wedding preparations continued smoothly. Elena moved among friends and family, coordinating tasks and ensuring that everything was in place. Each interaction reinforced the lesson she had delivered: she was capable, independent, and deserving of recognition. That evening, as she and Daniel reviewed the final details, Elena allowed herself a moment of reflection. The betrayal had been a severe blow, but it had also catalyzed a transformation. She had converted hurt into strategy, disappointment into action, and injustice into empowerment. The 72-hour deadline had served as both a constraint and a catalyst, pushing her to act decisively, think creatively, and assert her agency with clarity and purpose. Elena realized that revenge, when executed with precision and moral integrity, could be transformative rather than destructive. She had demonstrated the consequences of favoritism, reclaimed her dignity, and asserted her independence, all without causing lasting harm to her family or her relationships. The lesson was clear: recognition, respect, and acknowledgement are earned not through anger or confrontation alone, but through deliberate, competent action that leaves no room for dismissal. As she prepared for the final evening, Elena felt a sense of quiet triumph. The plan had worked, the demonstration of her competence had spoken louder than any argument could have. Her parents and sister had been confronted not with hostility, but with undeniable evidence of her capability and resilience, and in that confrontation, she had found a deeper satisfaction than any punitive measure could provide: the knowledge that she had reclaimed her agency, asserted her worth, and demonstrated the power of strategic, measured action. The 72-hour countdown was complete, and with it, the culmination of Elena's carefully orchestrated plan. The betrayal had been confronted, the consequences made clear, and her independence affirmed. She had navigated emotional turbulence, logistical challenges, and familial dynamics with precision, transforming hurt into empowerment and injustice into a quiet but undeniable lesson in accountability. Elena looked at Daniel, who smiled reassuringly. "You did it," he said simply. "Yes," Elena replied, feeling a calm, steady sense of triumph. "But it wasn't just about the wedding. It was about proving, to them and to myself, that I am capable, resilient, and worthy of respect." The final act of her plan had succeeded. The wedding would proceed as envisioned, but more importantly, Elena had demonstrated the depth of her strength and agency. The revenge she had sought was complete, not through humiliation or anger, but through strategic, deliberate action that demanded acknowledgement and respect. And as the sun set, casting a warm glow over the venue and the gathering, Elena felt a profound sense of closure. The betrayal had sparked a journey of empowerment, and the 72-hour deadline had been the crucible in which her resilience, intelligence, and strategic thinking were forged. She had reclaimed not only her wedding plans but her dignity, her voice, and her rightful place in her family's recognition. The morning after the 72-hour storm had passed, Elena awoke to a quiet apartment that felt almost surreal in its calm. The tension of the past 3 days, the betrayal, the frantic planning, the strategic maneuvers, had dissipated, leaving a new clarity in its place. She stretched, feeling the fatigue in her muscles but also a deep sense of accomplishment. The wedding was secure, the plans were intact, and most importantly, she had asserted her agency in a way that her parents could no longer ignore. Her phone buzzed with messages, congratulatory notes from friends who had witnessed her determination, messages of support from family members who had understood the challenges she faced, and a few tentative apologies from her parents. Each message reinforced the outcome she had engineered: recognition, acknowledgement, and respect earned not through confrontation, but through deliberate, strategic action. Elena reflected on the emotional journey she had endured. The betrayal had been sharp and painful, but it had also revealed a hidden well of resilience and resourcefulness within her. She had converted hurt into motivation, fear into strategy, and injustice into a platform for empowerment. The 72-hour deadline had been both a constraint and a catalyst, compelling her to act decisively, think creatively, and assert her agency with precision. She thought about her parents' reactions. Their apologies, though belated, carried the weight of genuine realization. For the first time, they had confronted the consequences of their favoritism, and they had done so not because of argument or confrontation, but because the results of Elena's initiative were undeniable. She realized that true impact often came not from anger or retribution, but from demonstrating competence and resilience in a way that could not be dismissed. Elena also reflected on her relationship with Vivienne. Her sister had been caught in the web of parental favoritism, enjoying advantages that Elena had been denied. Yet their relationship had survived, and perhaps even deepened, through this ordeal. Vivienne had witnessed Elena's strategic brilliance and resilience firsthand, and while guilt and admiration mixed in her expression, there was also a sense of respect that had not existed before. Elena recognized that revenge need not destroy relationships, it could transform them by creating understanding and acknowledgement. As she prepared for the wedding day itself, Elena felt a profound sense of calm. The event, which could have been overshadowed by anger and disappointment, had become a testament to her capability, independence, and resilience. Every detail, every interaction, every moment was a reflection of the strategic choices she had made, the deliberate actions she had taken, and the moral clarity she had maintained. The ceremony was intimate yet elegant, a reflection of Elena's vision and determination. Friends, family, and supporters gathered, each witness to the culmination of not just a wedding, but a journey of personal empowerment. Elena walked down the aisle with a steady heart, confident in the knowledge that she had navigated betrayal, injustice, and favoritism with grace, precision, and effectiveness. During the reception, Elena's parents approached her, their expressions a mixture of pride, regret, and admiration. "Elena," her father said, his voice low and sincere, "we underestimated you. We see now the strength and determination you have. We are proud of what you've accomplished, even if we didn't support you as we should have." Her mother nodded, eyes glistening. "We made mistakes, and we hope you can forgive us. You've shown us what it means to stand up, to take control, and to assert your worth. We are proud to be your parents." Elena felt a mixture of satisfaction and relief. The revenge she had sought was complete, not through humiliation or punishment, but through demonstration and agency. Her parents had been confronted with the consequences of their actions, her sister had witnessed her capability, and Elena herself had reclaimed control over her life and her dreams. As the evening progressed, Elena reflected on the deeper lessons of her experience. She realized that revenge was not inherently about causing pain or seeking retribution. True revenge, in its most effective form, was about reclaiming agency, demonstrating competence, and ensuring that injustice and favoritism could not go unchallenged. It was about creating undeniable consequences for actions that undermined respect and recognition, and about asserting one's worth in a way that could not be ignored. Elena also understood the importance of moral balance. Her actions had been strategic, deliberate, and controlled. She had avoided unnecessary cruelty, ensured that relationships were preserved, and maintained integrity in every decision. In doing so, she had transformed a painful betrayal into an opportunity for empowerment, learning, and growth. As the night drew to a close, Elena and Daniel shared a quiet moment away from the crowd. They reflected on the past 72 hours, the tension, the strategy, the victories, and the emotional turbulence. "You handled everything with such clarity," Daniel said, taking her hand. "You turned a betrayal into something incredible. I'm proud of you." Elena smiled, a deep, genuine smile that carried the weight of her journey. "It wasn't easy, but it had to be done. Not to punish anyone, but to assert my worth, my agency, and my vision. I've learned that revenge doesn't have to destroy, it can reveal, clarify, and empower." As they looked out over the reception, the lights twinkling and laughter filling the air, Elena felt a profound sense of closure. The betrayal, the favoritism, the hurt, they had all been catalysts for transformation. She had emerged stronger, wiser, and more self-assured. The wedding was not just a celebration of love, but a testament to resilience, strategy, and the power of deliberate action in the face of injustice. In the days that followed, Elena noticed subtle but significant changes in her family dynamics. Her parents treated her with renewed respect, acknowledging her opinions and decisions with sincerity. Vivienne approached her more thoughtfully, demonstrating a newfound understanding of the impact of favoritism and the importance of fairness. Elena's sense of empowerment persisted, not as a weapon, but as a quiet, enduring assertion of her agency and worth. Reflecting on the experience, Elena understood that revenge, when guided by strategy, moral clarity, and purpose, could achieve more than mere retribution. It could create recognition, demand respect, and transform relationships without causing unnecessary harm. She had learned that empowerment and agency were the most effective forms of response to betrayal, and that true satisfaction came not from punishment, but from the demonstration of one's capability and integrity. The $72 an hour deadline had been more than a temporal constraint, it had been a crucible in which Elena's resilience, strategic thinking, and moral clarity were tested and strengthened. She had faced the consequences of betrayal head-on, executed a carefully constructed plan, and emerged not only victorious, but transformed. As Elena prepared to settle into her new life as a married woman, she carried with her the lessons of this intense journey, the power of deliberate action, the importance of asserting agency, and the enduring strength that comes from transforming hurt into strategy. The betrayal had been painful, but it had also revealed a deep well of capability and resilience within her, and for that, she was grateful. Elena's story became a quiet legend among her friends and family, not because of conflict or humiliation, but because of the way she had handled injustice with intelligence, composure, and integrity. The lesson was clear: revenge, when guided by strategy, moral clarity, and purpose, could be transformative rather than destructive, empowering rather than cruel, and ultimately, profoundly satisfying. And in that satisfaction, Elena found peace. She had faced betrayal, navigated its consequences, and emerged not just unbroken, but stronger, wiser, and fully in control of her life, her choices, and her future.